Hello. Today we're going to be analyzing two games. So one is from a book that I'm currently reading. This one's called Understanding Chess Middle Games, and another one which got me to 1800 in Rapid. So let's start. So this game is very nice. So e4 is played here, and here we get g6 is known as a modern defense here, and then it can transpose into King's Indian structures here. d4, bishop g7, c4. I don't play this. I don't play c4. Instead, I play after bishop g7. I'd usually go f4, and let's say here, castles. This is known as the Austrian attack. It's gonna transpose into an Austrian attack, but it's usually what I play against the Pirks. So we get c4 and then d6. So this is known as the King's Indian now, and knight to c3 is played. e5 is played, and here we get knight ge2. A little bit of a weird move, I would say. It depends. It defends the pawn here, but it blocks the bishop. But I guess the bishop is gonna fianchetto this way, and also here it's more annoying after the bishop goes here to g4 in the future. Maybe, I don't know. Instead we get knight ge2, c6, bishop to e3, knight to f6, h3. And e takes d4. Knight takes d4. And if you notice, the structure looks oddly similar to a Maroczy bind, except the c pawn hasn't been exchanged for the d pawn. It was the e pawn. In case you didn't know, the Maroczy bind is e4, c5, knight to. Let's just play some theory here, and this takes g6 and. Let's say they go bishop here, bishop goes here, and then c4. This is known as the Maroczy bind structure. And as you will see in the future, after castles, you see that exact same pawn structure, but the c and d pawns have been exchanged. But in this case, it hasn't. Instead, it's the e pawn. Now this is, I'm not sure if it's a big difference. I guess it is, because the knight can't develop due to the c pawn. This bishop is limited by the c pawn, so yeah, there's a lot of limitations here. And the e file is open for their pieces. That's one difference. That's not here in the other structure that I showed you. So we get something similar to a Maroczy bind with a key difference. And here we get g3, fianchettoing the bishop through this long diagonal. Because the bishop won't be doing anything on e2 or d3, because it's just looking at some pawns here. And at d3, it's just going to look like a pawn. Now it just looks like a Stonewall where the bishop is a pawn. g3, d4, and here d5 is played. And here we get e takes and c takes. And so far, an exchange happens. And here, white goes for an interesting idea. Bishop to g2. Bishop to g2 sacrifices a pawn to accelerate their development. D takes c4 is played, and if you look carefully, white is very much aggressive here. Their pieces are very active, but the thing is, when you sacrifice pawns, your advantage is only short term, so you really have to be fast. If you're too slow, you will lose. And you can take a guess at who will win the game. So far, let's evaluate the position. Now, white is a little better, even though he's down pawn, because if you look carefully, knights are looking very active here, especially this one, controlling some squares, preventing the bishop from developing through this diagonal. And this bishop is pressuring here, so the knight can't develop to c6, because then we would just win our pawn back. And then, additionally, the b6 pawn can't move, because then we'll just take a free rook. So, we're getting pretty active here. But knight db5 is a little inaccurate according to the engine. The engine does not like this, because it allows the opponent to go knight to c6, which is exactly what happens in the game. Now, knight to c6, suddenly they're developing. Because this knight moved out of the way, suddenly this isn't a free pawn anymore. We get castles, and here we get bishop to f5. So that's another downside in playing knight db5. Now the bishop goes to f5, right? And the knight went to c6. So suddenly, there's no compensation anymore. We both have the bishop pair, but in terms of who has the advantage, it's the one with the extra pawn. Because the bishop is going here in the future. And here we get bishop to c5. And here, black sacrifices the exchange. And let's see what the best move is. The engine, even the engine wants bishop to d3. Why? Let's evaluate carefully. Because after it takes, you cannot take this because then there's queen takes, rook takes, bishop takes, bishop takes, and then bishop takes here. And if you're confused, we take here first, right? And if bishop takes here, there's we trade queens first. And the rook obviously has to take, and here we just take a bishop. And the reason for that being that we attack this hanging knight. If the knight wasn't here, I'm sure this would have been equal, probably, I don't know. So this is what would have happened. That's why bishop takes f8 is forced. And this is the positional sacrifice we're talking about here. So let's evaluate the position. The engine thinks black is better. Why? They have a bishop pair and a pawn for the exchange. That means there is no one that can challenge the dark sword bishop, right? So bishop pair is a nice advantage to have here, and my game will also display that. And so far, this bishop is very strong at limiting white's pieces here. Rook goes to e1. And here a6 is played, simply kicking the knight out, and suddenly white is becoming passive here. Their pieces are just garbage. As you can see, both knights are here. This knight doesn't do anything. Limiting the knight here, not exactly because the knight can go, but you know, we have a nice bishop pair advantage. Obviously, you don't want to take here, because after it takes, you lose your bishop pair advantage. I mean, yeah, you do double some pawns, but now you lose your bishop pair. You don't want to do that. Instead, we get knight to d4, simply centralizing the pieces and further limiting this knight here. And here we get rook to c1 with an idea to pressure this pawn here. Maybe an idea to take in the future if this knight moves. And here we get bishop to h6. Bishop to h6 attacks the pawn. And here we get a little mistake here, f4. Because f4, not only does it open this diagonal over here for the queen or bishop to use, it also weakens the g3 pawn. So black immediately exploits that with knight to h5. Knight to h5 simply pressures this pawn over here. And here we get knight to d5. And here you can pause the video to what would you play in this position. So if we evaluate the position carefully, let's just play a random waiting move. What white wants to do is win the queen. Well, it's not exactly working in this variation. Oh wait, no, never mind. If the knight isn't here, if it takes the pawn, say it takes a pawn, what white wants to do is win the queen, take, and then go here, right? And that's the idea. This is exactly what happens in the game. Yes, black sacrifices the queen. But black just has too much compensation here with the minor pieces. Here, if we evaluate, we have a knight and bishop, negates out, and then we have rook. Here, black has two minor pieces and two extra pawns for the queen. You can count 4 pawns and then 6 pawns for black. So 2 minor pieces and 2 pawns for the queen. Now normally this wouldn't be too good for the side without the queen, but if you look carefully, they're just very active here. Bishop pressuring the pawn, knight getting ready to fork the rook here, and they're just very much active. Rook takes c4 is played, just sacrificing the exchange with an idea after bishop takes, maybe to take this. And knight takes c4, and the knight's hanging, and here b5 is played, sacrificing the knight, and here king to f2 is played. Why king to f2? Why did you just give the knight away? If you look carefully, the knight is going to be passive wherever it goes. If it goes here, If it goes to the e4 square, let's check. There's knight ge2 check, just winning the pawn. If the knight goes to a3, then it's just passive. If the knight goes to d2, then there's bishop takes f4, and black is just way too strong in this position. And finally, if knight to b6, then you're just pushing your knight into the opponent's camp. I mean, this doesn't look too good. I would doubt any human would play this, because why would you be driving your knight into the opponent's camp? It's just highly risky. So we had king to f2 instead. And here, black goes for knight g f5. Knight g f5 defends the knight. And here, we get knight to d6. With an idea that if you take, we can take this, of course, in case you were wondering. But here, black goes for a nice idea. Rook e2 simplifying. Ooh, obviously, takes is the best move, because if you don't take, let's say after rook e2, let's say you play something like king to g1, then you're just losing. And there's rook takes f2 here. Brilliant tactic with a fork incoming after takes. So, and if king here, then obviously you just lose queen. So that's why you have to take. Only move knight takes e2. And here, not king takes e2, because then we would be playing an endgame where we are down a piece. Knight takes. And here, opponent goes for knight takes f4. Sacrificing the bishop. Why? Because after knight takes g2, if you take, then there's f5, and this is actually a winning endgame for black. Why? Because let's say you sacrifice your knight because it's gonna get trapped. What happens? Well, if you look carefully, there's an extra pawn here. We have a 2-on-1 here and a 2-on-2 here. This can be used as a distraction. These two pawns, let's say this pawn is gone, that can be used as a distraction to win the pawns here. It's just very easy to play this. And after knight to g4, sooner or later, black went on to convert this into a win. So that was a very nice game. Now we look into the game that allowed me to cross 1800. This one right here. Now this was a very nice game. It was a short one, but just had to show it. It's another game that shows how you can just use a bishop pair very nicely. So e4 and d5, the Scandinavian defense. E takes, queen takes, and knight to f3. The reason why I want to play knight to f3 here is because I want to go d4 and then c4 and then knight to c3. Because in knight to c3 you block the c pawn. And so I go here, and we have bishop to f5 here. Just maybe an idea to fork the pawns. If I go something like d5, then I can lose the pawn here. The engine says it's not completely losing. There's bishop to e3. What happens after takes? Let's actually check. Queen takes, bishop takes, and here there's knight to c3, and this is somewhat an equal position, even though we are down a pawn. We are just ahead in development. So that's a variation I could have went to, but instead I just go bishop to e2 here, just developing my bishop. Yeah, and here we get c6, I castle, and e6, and eventually in the game later, d4, queen to d8. Inaccuracy in my opinion, because why would you be undeveloping your queen when it's not attacked? I just went d4. Yes, my idea is to go c4, but at least you could have developed some pieces like maybe the bishop, maybe the knight. Because you have to wait for them to commit the pawn first before you go. Because what if they don't play c4? What if they play something else? You don't want to be undeveloping if they're not attacking. Knight to f6, and here is good. Knight to c3, bishop to e7, and h3. h3 is a prophylaxis to bishop to g4 things. Knight coming to g4 if I ever put my bishop on e3, and if I put my bishop on f4, which you will see in the game later, it always has this hiding square on h2. Knight to knight bd7 is split, and here I just control the diagonal immediately, no thinking, because just develop. I spent around like 6 seconds. Here the reason why I played this is because another bishop can't challenge my bishop, because this knight blocks the queen from protecting the bishop. Knight b6 is played, and here I just go queen to b3, an idea to pressure this, and just develop, get my queen out of the d file so I can put a rook in there instead, and maybe in the future break through their annoying set of pawns with d5 in the future. Queen to c8 is played. Honestly, no idea what this does. It's the worst move I've seen in my life. I don't know what this does, to be honest. Well, why would you be putting your queen on the c8 square? What does it even do? Instead, you could have played like queen to d7. What does queen to c2 do? What? Literally, can someone explain to me what this move does? Here I go, knight to h4. So, the reason why I played knight to h4 is because, if you look at the bishop carefully, because of this pawn structure, if you notice something, this looks like a Caro structure or a French. Except in the French, the bishop is locked behind the pawn structure, either here or here. But, so I decided to chase for the bishop pair with knight h4. Knight to h4 attacks the bishop, right? If the bishop would have went here, I would have just takes, and undeveloped my knight because it was attacked. And here, I have the bishop pair. The bishop can go to d3, attack the knight, and pressure this pawn if they castle on that side of the board. Instead, we have bishop to g6. Bishop to g6, and I just take h6. Yes, they do get the h file, but if you evaluate the position carefully, where are they castling? Like, you don't want to be castling queenside, because then my bishop is just gonna be obliterating the king here, and then c4, and then c5 is gonna be a very strong push here, just kicking the knight out, allowing me to open this up. So you don't want to castle queenside. But if you castle kingside, suddenly you lose your compensation for losing the bishop pair. And actually, I'm the one attacking you, because if you castle kingside, now you have this weakness over here on the h file. So I just go bishop to f3. Now the idea of bishop to f3 is simple, because in these positions I played one before, so I know every time I get the bishop pair in these kinds of positions, I want to put it through these two diagonals, because in the future I want to break through with a3, b4, and then or just a4, b4, and then b5 here, and those kinds of things to open up my bishops. Here we get knight bd7. They're just playing weird moves at this point. I don't know why they're undeveloping their pieces. And here I just go rook fe1. And there are nasty threats in this position. Let's evaluate the position. Why does it say I'm up 2 pawns, even though the material is equal? Number 1, bishop pair advantage, right? Number 2, their king is still in the center. That is another advantage. Number 3, in terms of who has more development, it's me. So, that all adds to me with a 2-pawn advantage. And the d5 things are coming if you still keep your king in the center. And they do. Knight to h5. And now you see why h3 is such a useful resource. Because my bishop hides on the h2 square. And I say no to letting him win back the bishop pair. And here they just go knight hf6. Like, what is bro doing? Knight hf6. What is this maneuver? So he's just playing terribly. And here I just go d5. d5 just breaking through immediately. And suddenly, I'm just even more winning. Because after knight takes d5, first of all, I'm threatening to win a piece. But if you take, now I go here. Bishop takes d5. And I fork both pawns. With the queen and the bishop here. As you can see. We have what's known as the right triangle, as Hikaru would call it. Oh, wait, no, we don't. Oh, yeah, we do. Right here, right? Is known as a right triangle. And here we attack both pawns. And here they just castle and resign after I take. So definitely a nice game. We just activated a bishop pair. Stay tuned for tomorrow. I will be uploading 2 rounds of the standard tournament. So, this is the end of the video, and bye.